Persuasive Selling and Power Negotiation. Continued. Disc 5.
Jennifer Sedlock is an inspiring and educating speaker who moves audiences to action. She gets to the heart of the issues and is laser focused on helping people get to the results they want in life. Coming from years of management and training, she will walk you through the steps and strategies to conquer your roadblocks and get on with your talents, plans, and purpose. Jennifer is helping thousands of people to make choices and changes that will impact the rest of their lives. Please welcome Jennifer Sedlock.
Hello, this is Selling Beyond Your Own Style. If you work in sales, you communicate with just about every type of personality there is. Do you get along with and click with some people more than others? Do you ever wish you could understand quickly what a person is likely to be thinking based on a few things they say? How would you like to improve your results by simply seeking to understand someone with equal and opposite strengths and values than you? Those are some of the things that we're going to address and answer today in this program. Sometimes things click with others and sometimes they don't. The danger we run into as salespeople is that we think people are similar to us, or if they don't, they should think similarly to us. See, we need to be aware of the differences in energy, in information receiving, in decision making, and preferred styles of living and operating before we can really realize how to flex to another person in delivering what they need to hear about whatever we are selling. In my business, I sell words, ideas, and sometimes products, but I need to be able to reach everyone in an audience, not just people who see the world like I do. Some people need us to talk faster, some slower. Some need more details. Some need the big picture. Some need facts, data, and proof, while others of us need to focus on values, being personable, and listening well. Today, we are going to look at the strategies for success in looking to the opposite sides of our own strengths and seeing what is important on the other side to some others. This program is called Selling Beyond Your Own Style because we have a preferred way of doing things. We get our energy in one of two ways, either with people or from being alone. We receive information more one way than the other. We make decisions two different ways, logical, rational, and focused on the law and tasks, or compassionate, situational, and focused on the people it will impact. We live our lives in order and planned out, or flexible and spontaneous. We do choose all of these things at various times, but we tend to fall into patterns of comfort on what we prefer. And then over time, we've perfected those preferences until we're very good at them. And we can have a little blind spot on the other side at times. So sometimes our way we think is the better way, not realizing that the opposite can be just as effective for others and that really the two balance any blind spots and make for better teams, better decisions, and less missed data. We must flex to our customers or run the risk of not understanding or delivering their needs, or worst case, losing their trust and their business. In this CD, you're going to learn the different styles, figure out where you fit, and learn some key ways to improve communication and success with some of the other people in your lives, at work, at home, and in your community. The basis of this information is Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and whether you know nothing about this topic or a lot, you will gain insight into your style and others and what to do to sell and communicate beyond your own style, creating more success in your relationships, your productivity, and your results. And if you want more information about Myers-Briggs, you can start on my webpage if you want. There's a Myers-Briggs page and the links page, which will take you to sources, publishers, and all kinds of information about Myers-Briggs. Today, as we go through this, I am going to talk and answer two questions throughout. What is it? Meaning, how do we figure out what someone else is? and some of you figuring out yourselves, and how to use it, how to communicate different with others who are opposites. So what is it and how do we use it? We're going to start with understanding this word preferences that I used. Imagine writing your signature as you normally do. And what does that feel like? Sort of like autopilot, right? It's just automatic. You do it frequently and it's easy. Now imagine breaking that arm and having to sign with your opposite hand. It's awkward, it takes more thought, probably slower, messier, and it might even make you feel like a child again. Might even look like a kid's writing, huh? This is the nature of preference. We prefer something over another, and it's not that we can't do the opposite or that we can't choose to many times. It's just that when it gets down to it, we prefer some ways of operating over others. So we're going to talk in 4 areas of preference. And in each area, I'm going to explain it, give examples, give ideas of how to figure it out, and then how to use this information. So we are first going to go to the first area of preference, which is extroverts and introverts. And what the definition really is where do we get our energy? And we just take it right back there. I'm going to give you examples, but where do you get your energy? Starting with extroverts. Extroverts get their energy from people. They gain energy as they are with people. So they are attracted to being around people rather than being alone in general. They like to talk things out. They're typically pretty social and outgoing, expressive. They like to interact. They have a real interest in breadth of subjects. They tend to maintain multiple relationships. They like to have lots of friends at work, at all different areas of their life, be it family, be it at the gym. They like to expend energy. They're interested in external events, typically pretty open and disclosing, and they like short, interrupted time frames. They don't mind being interrupted. They like to approach people. And why? Because they gain energy. Okay, now let's look at the opposite. Let's look at introverts. They tend to lose energy when they're with people. Therefore, they need to go off and be alone and do a more solitary activity in order to gain energy. Introverts tend to prefer to be one-on-one with people or with a very small group of people. They tend to be a little more contemplative. They like to concentrate. They like to think through things before they answer and talk about it. They really, that is their strength, in fact. The interest in depth of subjects. They like to conserve energy. In fact, if you think about energy, you're probably an introvert because extroverts don't even tend to think about energy. If you're interested in internal reactions, or private, guarded, reserved, territorial, all of those fit the introvert much more than the extrovert. And introverts actually like to be approached by others. Extroverts don't mind doing the approaching. Introverts tend to not approach others. They will tend to wait. So therefore, who's talking first in a meeting? The extroverts. The introverts will talk if called upon, but typically they'll do more of the listening and waiting until they're asked. They have a wealth of information if you will stop and ask, but if you don't ask, sometimes they won't interject their opinion. And introverts tend to like a heads up and not like surprises. So if you're asking them some questions, you might not expect them to answer right away. They're going to think about it before they talk and speak about it. Extroverts are the opposite. They might speak, answer you, and then they think about it, and then they change their mind and come back and tell you later. So in sales, this is very important to know about someone. And how can you see it? Well, really, it is pretty easy to see, but you can't be for sure. But typically extroverts will talk faster, talk louder. They will, once you get them going, they will just sort of increase in speed and excitement about something, especially if they're very interested in whatever you're selling. And therefore, go with them and continue to stay on that level with them. Now, with an introvert, they might tend to be a little lower in volume and speak slower and take their time, and they might want to be asked more questions. The extrovert will lay it all on the line, where the introvert, you won't always know exactly what they're thinking. Here's a good example. You get on an airplane, you sit next to someone. With an extrovert, you tend to know half of their life history by the time you get off the flight, right? Okay, but you could be friends with an introvert for years and still not really know some of their deepest thoughts and feelings. So that therein lies some of the differences. And so when you're taking a look at how does that impact my selling, well, first you have to figure out who you are. And are you the extrovert or are you more the introvert? And I get a question a lot, is it better to be one or the other in sales or in even management? No, absolutely not. It's that our gifts are different, our talents are different, our just where our interest lies is different. And so we will approach the job differently, but we can be just as successful. In fact, when I was in management, I had two great salespeople. One was clearly an extrovert. One was clearly an introvert. When we came in the morning, the extrovert wanted to talk. Hi, how you doing? How was Johnny's ball game? You know, we would talk. And that was because they were gaining energy. And I knew that. So it was okay that they were interrupting me because I'd already been there and I was already working. That was fine because then they got some energy, went to their office, left the door open, talked very loudly, do more talking than emailing, do more calling, do more visits. That's how they operated, and they were very successful. Then the introvert walks in the door, ready for work. They might go directly to their office unless they actually meet eyes with someone, because introverts tend to be a little bit more in their head and they don't need energy. They're going to go get energy by being alone. So they might go directly into their office, shut the door, and come out when? At noontime for lunch. And then they might not share exactly what went on unless you ask. Hey, how'd it go this morning? How many calls did you have? How many sales? Just depends on what you ask them to how much information you get. Whereas the extrovert will probably have been in your office 4 or 5 times before lunchtime, sharing with you what's going on and needing to bounce off ideas, but they might not even ask you a question. Why? Because they just need to talk a little, gain a little energy, and then they're off and running to the next. So which approach is better? Neither. They are both great for those people. It's just that we do it differently. So you're probably getting a really good sense of what you are, and maybe you're even thinking about some family members, some coworkers, some people that work around you, maybe even your boss. And so it's great to know what other people are so that you can figure out how to communicate just a little bit better. And we call this style flexing. And it's not changing who you are. Don't be worried about that. It's just flexing to meet the needs of the other person. Because it doesn't really matter if they know this information. You can walk away from this CD today and make some changes in your communication that are going to improve the connection and the understanding of what people need and how they need to hear it. Because if you're talking quickly and you're doing all the talking and wondering why someone else isn't talking, it might be because you're not slowing down to ask the question and giving them the time, even giving them 24 hours to come back and give you an answer. And the opposite, if you're an introvert and you tend to wait and not ask as many questions and do more of the sitting back, the strength you have is that you're listening. You're asking a question and you're really listening. But again, are you connecting with an extrovert or an introvert? You need to do things differently. For example, if you want to communicate better with an extrovert, you've figured out that that's what they are, then we've got a whole list. In fact, I got a free handout on the website. But to communicate better with an extrovert is be social. Notice and respond to their expressiveness. Show interest and reflect their enthusiasm. Take turns, intersperse short comments with them, give them feedback, nonverbal and verbal. They want to know where they stand with you and they want to know now. Let them talk to sort out their experience, be a good sounding board. They need to talk to know what they think. Let them elaborate and tell it all. Expect detail and expansion and allow them to self-disclose. Don't withdraw from them. Open up, stay close, smile. Give them those visuals. That's very important to them. Now let's flip it over. If you're communicating with an introvert, you need to do something opposite. Slow down, get more serious. Give them time and space to think things through alone. Be patient. Give them time to answer. Know that you will only get a selective version of all they have thought through. Allow for their privacy. Don't expect them to self-disclose and trust until trust is built. Focus attention on ideas. They'll talk a lot about their ideas and yours, but you have to ask. They usually don't like surprises, like I mentioned, so don't surprise them as much. In fact, they don't even like awards as much. Extroverts would award them any day, any time. And introverts, you know what happens? If you award them too much, you know, if you're an introvert, you start to wonder, what are they up to? What do they want from me? There's this skepticism that starts happening. And that's just truly part of the gifts of being an introvert. So those are some ways we can communicate better with an extrovert and an introvert. And in stress, extroverts and introverts, they react very differently. They will speed up if they're an extrovert. They'll slow down if they're an introvert. So there are different ways we react to different situations. So that's the first area of preference. And that's the first area you can really impact your communication with someone. Let's move to how do we receive information? And this is what I call the input. How do I know what I know? And how do I sort out the information? What do I pay attention to? We got two kinds of people. And again, you're somewhere on the continuum, but you prefer one mode or the other. If you're a sensor, you gather information through the five senses. You like facts, literal meanings, details. You learn best sequentially. You like specific instructions. You follow directions literally. Enjoy repetition. Maybe you tend to focus on the present, the past. Rely on experience. So you really, if you think of words like have your feet on the ground or values perspiration, values the hard work, that is more of a sensor. Let's talk about intuitives because they're very different. They gather information sort of through a sixth sense. They like to look at the big picture, not necessarily the details as much. They like concepts, metaphors, patterns. They learn best randomly. They like general directions. So a big picture direction, like tell me the results and I'll get there. They follow hunches. They like variety, diversity, novelty. They tend to anticipate the future and rely on imagination. They tend to be more speculative, value inspiration and great ideas. Sometimes they're called head in the clouds. You've got your head in the clouds. And then a sensor might be called the opposite. You have your feet on the ground. So it's what are you attracted to too? As I'm talking through both of these areas, what are you attracted to? Not because you wish you were the opposite, but because, oh, that's what I tend to do. That's the way I tend to see it. You see, because sensors and intuitives receive information differently. They can listen to the exact same presentation and hear very different things on how they're processing that information. So, for example, an intuitive may, let's say you're going and you're in a new job and you're an intuitive. You would like, even in a new situation and even with a new boss, you would like the big picture of where you're supposed to go. What are the end results I'm supposed to get? And let me get there on my own. That is truly how an intuitive likes to operate. A sensor is the exact opposite. When they are in a new situation with a new boss, and even in a long-term situation, they would prefer to have the steps and exact expectations of what they're supposed to be doing. Steps meaning give me 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. Lay it out what I'm supposed to do. Are you starting to get the idea that this could be a problem if you're managing someone of the opposite, if you're selling to someone of the opposite, if you're communicating with someone of the opposite, you're looking at things completely differently. Okay, so it's really simple if it's someone of the same information processing and how they receive information, but it's when it's that opposite. So let's look at a couple of examples. You go into a team meeting, okay, and what are the sensors thinking? They're looking at here and now. They're looking at today. They're looking at details. They're looking at a step-by-step process. And you've got the intuitive saying, well, what if? Let's look at the possibilities. These are all the things we could try. And if a sensor would answer this way, oh, we tried that last year. Oh, that might not work. They're going to be more practical, down to earth about it. Can you see how we need both? If you don't have those intuitives in your organization, looking to the future and asking, where is this industry going and what can we do? And intuitives tend to be the entrepreneurs that even start the companies. But they may not stay forever, because when the company gets to a point where they're doing everything that is more strategic and fulfilling the process, that can get very boring to an intuitive. So unless they continue to look into the future and look into the changes, change is very easy for the intuitive. In fact, staying the course of something that they do have to do repetitiously is actually much harder for them. The sensors, they love repetition. They love to do the same thing. And if you get someone on the extreme scale of sensor, they actually maybe even eat the same breakfast, exactly same thing every day. It is funny when you ask these questions in big seminars and you find some of the habits are just so similar when you get to especially the extreme ends of the continuum. The more you fall in the middle, the more fuzzy the definitions become for you. And it doesn't mean that you don't prefer one or the other. All it means is that you may not prefer it as much as someone else. And so again, the success rate is not, it's just what skills you're using and how you're processing it. There's no right or wrong, good or bad. It's all just how we process it. And it is different. And we do have blind spots. If I'm a sensor and I'm looking at the details, that's great. But I've got a blind spot for the big picture, and I need somebody around who's looking at the big picture. If I'm an intuitive and I'm looking at the big picture, but I'm not looking at the details or how to really practically implement this, then I'm going to miss that. So you can see how you can even look at organizations and see who's at the top and how they run their organizations. How methodical is it? How risk-taking is it? All has to do with who's at the top and what's going on. And again, everybody can be good in a position. It's just which gifts are we using to make that work? Okay, so we've got sensors and intuitives. Let's say one more example. Let's say that you are going in to buy a car. Sensors, remember we said they're sensing. They want to see it, touch it, taste it, feel it. Okay, so they need to sense that product. They need to feel. You ask most sensors, they test drove a car before they bought it. But ask the intuitives. Typically, they probably haven't even. It wasn't a need to get in the car. They might just look at it on the highway and go, ooh, I look good in that. And that is enough for them. And they may, again, the blind spots may come. Ooh, these seats are kind of small for me. Or those kind of things can come up later for an intuitive. Again, there's the blind spot. But they typically are right about what they chose for themselves. And it's unexplainable to a sensor sometimes. Sensors are like, how did you get there? And again, it's because sensors learn sequentially, whereas intuitives learn randomly. They might gather information from 10 different sources and not even be able to explain it to the sensor. Again, we're talking in extremes. Of course, everybody does all of this. But what does this really mean to you? And how can you stand across from someone that you've just met and you need to share a product or a service with them? How do you know? Well, ask a big picture question, ask a detail question, and you'll see where they start to really take off in their discussion. And you'll start to see quickly what they need and want. So do you need to cover that big picture details and things that would fit that? Or do you need to get into the nitty-gritty, really fine details? One other example I can give you for this is an activity I do when we're all trying to figure out what our type is I split up the people who think they're sensors and the people who think they're intuitives, and we describe a pen. They get in small groups of, say, 4 to 8 people and describe a pen. the sensors get seriously detailed. I mean, you know the circumference of it, the exact size on every end, you know the materials, the color of the writing, the script even on the pen. I mean, they get detail, and keep drilling down on the details. The intuitives, those groups, if you listen to them, they're bored in a couple of minutes after a few details, and they're starting to talk about how, oh, this could be a flying object, and they throw the pen across the room. Or they start to say, this could have been the pen that signed the Declaration of Independence. Do you hear the difference? Details versus the what-if possibilities. It's just how we look at things, and both are needed. But what are the people you are trying to communicate with? If they're your same way of information processing, it's easy. If they're the opposite, you want to look at the lists, you want to take a good look at it right before you go in and talk to them, and that way you can shift and flex to be giving them the opposite information that they so vitally need to make that decision. Now let's move to decision making, because that is the third area of preference. Because the second one I just talked about was how we receive information. And we do that differently, we just heard. Now, how do we actually make the decisions? I call this the output, because something's got to come out in a decision form. So we do this two different ways as well. We've first got thinkers, and then we've got feelers. And those aren't necessarily the best words to convey what it means. Thinkers, though, let's start with them. They rule with the head. They're objective, detached. They like logical systems. They want to focus on the data, and they focus on the task of what they're doing. So they value justice, fairness, they're firm and fair. It's impersonal to them, meaning they don't necessarily put themselves inside the situation. I'll give you an example for that in a minute. But they really see themselves as outside of the situation. So they're kind of, analyzing it from the outside, looking in, using criteria, reasons, standards, and they look at things as right and wrong. Let's look at the feeler, because it's opposite. They tend to rule with the heart. They're subjective and involved, meaning they throw themselves into the decision as if they're part of it, even at times when they're not. But they do become part. They put themselves as part of it. They focus on the people and the feelings and how the results are going to impact people. So it's very important to have both, obviously. Feelers value harmony, caring, compassionate. They can be very persuasive about the personal side as well. And so when the thinker's looking at the law, the feeler's looking at the extenuating circumstances, because you do need to look at both. And that's why we have judges, and that's why we have a whole system that has to look at everything. Okay, so let's talk about this. In figuring out if you're a thinker or a feeler, you may already know, but some examples that really help us to figure it out are you, when you make a decision, how do you decide? What information is most valuable in drawing conclusions or making judgments? How do you process that information? So sort of, where are you sifting it, if you will? So if you're focused on the task and the logic and the details and the facts, if you're digging for facts, you're probably a thinker. And if you're a feeler, you are probably focused more on the person. So if you're selling a product, the thinker might be focused on how that product works, but the feeler is focused on how is the person as the end user really going to be using this. Can you see how much you need both? Absolutely. Wouldn't be as many recalls if we'd run it through those feelers more often. Okay, we're all great at decision making. It's not a choice of right or wrong or good or bad. In fact, I told you thinkers think it's right or wrong. Feelers tend to look at things as good or bad. Those are very different, right and wrong, good and bad. It's just how we look at it. It's just how we make decisions. And to be honest with you, we make decisions best if we look at both. Meaning, if you're one way, you should actually approach someone else or have a partner that you can go to and ask the opposite. I do that with my dad. He looks at things very differently and he makes decisions a different way. So I'll present my information and data to him, and then he will take a look at it and ask me questions that I would never think of. And I can't tell you how many times that has helped me to make a better decision. Because when you look at someone, look and talk with people that process information differently and then make decisions differently, you will have a better picture. Because if you can go to all four of those areas, the sensor, intuitive, thinker, and feeler, you will definitely make better decisions. So how does this work when you're trying to sell someone something? And whether it's a long-term sales process or short-term, you can start to figure out what people are fairly quickly in the thinking, feeling. Because what are they talking about again? What is important to them? Are they asking you for more facts and details and data? And as you might even hear that the sensor, if they're also a thinker, they really need a lot of details and facts, because we use that word in both of those areas, right? And if they're a feeler, they need to know how this is going to be used and how this is going to impact everyone else. And so no matter what you're talking about, you need to appeal to the information that they need. And you can do it by simply asking some questions. And even, if you're using the cheat sheet of the handout and you're looking at, oh, here's how I communicate better with someone of the opposite, you can look at that and formulate your own questions that fit, really diagnosing what that person is, because it only takes a few questions. It's very simple when you get down to it. And the other person doesn't have to know at all what you're asking. But it helps to give you the information of how to proceed with them, what information to give them, and what direction to go. So for example, when you communicate with a thinker, you want to be more reasonable. You want to approach problems and decisions with logic and analysis. You want to explain your reasons. You want to look at the principles, the like fact, logic, assume, opinion. All of that is really important. You want to talk about what is objective, impersonal, cause and effect, sequential. All of that is very important in going through that process with people. Now, that are thinkers. Now, how do you communicate better with a feeler? You be more sensitive and caring, address feelings, yours, theirs, everyone affected, especially if they're buying something that is going to be used with other people. If you ask a few questions in that direction, they will head there very quickly if they're a feeler, and they won't if they're a thinker, if that's not their focus on why they're buying what they're buying. Again, with feelers, what are their personal priorities? What is subjective? What are the values of what this thing is? Because values are very important to feelers. Being compassionate, supportive, and responsive, all will get you very far with a feeler decision maker. Address hurt feelings with sympathy, empathy, compassion, and apologize. Hear the extenuating circumstances and take a look at both sides of the whole equation. Again, figuring out what you are. That's what you want to do. Figure out, is this person more like me or are they more the opposite? And then you'll know which way to communicate best with them. You'll know also how they make a decision. And if you're wanting someone to purchase something from you, you want to appeal to how they want to make a decision, obviously. Okay. So now that we've talked about extroverts and introverts, sensors and intuitives, thinkers and feelers, we are going to go to the last area of preference and then put it all together, because we are all an aspect of all four areas, but really all 8. We've got 4 that are our strengths and 4 that are somewhat our blind spots. So we want to take a look at what does all that mean. The last one's very simple. Judgers and perceivers. And this is, how do you like to operate and live in the outer world? Judgers tend to want to plan ahead, be in control. They want to make a plan, have a list, and they want to do that plan. In fact, they get a little ruffled when they don't get to do and fulfill that plan. So they are really focused on getting things done, checking off a list, love lists, love day planners, that kind of thing. Let's look at perceivers. Their strengths are the opposite. They are flexible, spontaneous. They like to wait and see. They're actually more comfortable waiting for a decision. They don't want to make a decision yet. And once they make the decision, they're not as comfortable. Whereas the judger is the opposite. They're uncomfortable until they make a decision. Then they feel better. So you can see right away the challenges. Putting it all together, you look at if you're in a team meeting with every type, you've got your extroverts who are talking more, your introverts who have a lot of information, but nobody's asking them to share it, or i.e., that's the best way to draw out an introvert is ask them questions. Then you've got your sensors who are answering in details and talking about the details. You've got the intuitives who are coming up with all the possibilities and, oh, we should try this. And then you've got your thinkers who are trying to look at the facts and details and data. And then you've got your feelers who are saying, oh, but wait a minute, how is that going to affect this group of people if we make it this way? And then you've got your judgers who want to make a decision. In fact, they come to the meeting thinking that we are making a decision. They just always assume that. And the perceivers always assume we're just here to gather information. We don't need to make a decision today, do we? Deadline? What deadline? Okay, when all of this is going on, how do we even get anything done? It's amazing that we do. But when we look at what our strengths are, and when we look at what those opposites are, we can truly start to see how to look to others and understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from a different place, and why they're making decisions so differently and talking so differently. They're really not trying to irritate you. They're just being themselves. Let's talk a little bit more about judgers and perceivers. Judgers, here's an example. If you call, say, a client or a friend, and you want to get together, say, on Friday. Let's say it's a friend, because that's an even easier example to really truly know which you are and which some of your friends and family are. Let's say you say, hey, let's go out Friday night. A judger, if you've called a judger, they will answer this way. They will say, oh, I was just thinking about this movie I want to see. Hey, do you want to meet at 5 o'clock at such and such restaurant? And then at 7 o'clock, we'll go to this movie. I know it happens to be showing at this place at this time. They'll make a plan. They will commit to it and they will be there. Even if it's a flight 6 months from now, typically judges make a plan and they will do that plan unless something really pulls them off course. Same question. Let's say you've called a perceiver friend. Hey, you want to go out Friday night? This is their response. That sounds great. I'd love to. Call me Friday afternoon and we'll make a plan. Which are you? Which are your customers? Which of these are your spouse, your kids, your family members? It can make a huge difference in how we operate, how we want to make decisions, how we want to decide. And I don't know why, but somehow judgers tend to marry perceivers. And even if you aren't the exact opposite, you might be further on the scale. You might both be perceivers, but one's so far flexible that the other one appears to be a judger to that person. There's always somebody who's got to organize it and get us going out the door or making the decision, right? And if you have that couple that you've been trying to get together with, but they always are wait and see, can't make plans with, now you know why. And you know how to make the whole event more spontaneous, and possibility thinking will take you so much further with those people. And making a plan and being punctual will take you so much further with judgers. So I hope you're getting the idea that there is a lot more to communicating than the way we do it. And there is so much style flexing that can help us to really connect with people on a much deeper, sounder level if we will just flex a little. It doesn't mean changing who we are. It means we're going the extra mile. We are stepping over the line into their thinking and their way so that we can connect better with them. For example, I know when I want to do something with my husband on the weekend, he is an intuitive, an introvert, and a perceiver. So because he's an introvert, he doesn't necessarily want to go out and do a lot of things and plan ahead. Because of the perceiver, he doesn't want to plan ahead. So and we have 3 kids, which is very busy for an introvert. I'm the extrovert. busy, who cares? I'm just gaining more energy as the day goes on, and he's getting more exhausted. So if I'm on Tuesday thinking, I want to go bike riding on Saturday morning, let's get everybody up and go out, I don't tell it to him or ask him or share it with him on Tuesday. I wait till Saturday morning, wake up, stretching out my arms. Hey, you want to go for a bike ride? It's spontaneous. It's right now. He says, yes, that sounds great. Let's get the kids ready. Guess what's already in the car? The bikes are packed. The lunch is going to be packed in minutes. I've already got it all planned out, right? So that's how we can style flex. It's really, and if he'd said no, I have to be prepared for that too. But we understand each other, so I don't bug him with that kind of stuff on Tuesday because he doesn't want to decide. It is stressful for him to decide. And I can decide in my mind, but I have to be flexible at the last minute that it may not work out. But we can use this information to really flex to each other and have a much more meaningful conversation with people and help understand exactly what they're thinking and why it's so different than maybe what we're thinking. So in summary, when you're communicating with someone who's an extrovert, be energetic and social. When you're communicating with an introvert, slow down and get serious. If you're communicating with a sensor, be specific and practical. If you're communicating with an intuitive, be imaginative and focus on the future. When you're communicating with an intuitive, did I already say that? Yes, I did. When you're communicating with someone who can't remember what they just said, I'm just kidding. When you're communicating with a thinker, be reasonable and task-oriented. When you're communicating with a feeler, be sensitive and personal. When you're communicating with a judger, be punctual and plan ahead. And with a perceiver, be spontaneous and flexible. Selling beyond your own style. Yes, we all have our preferred ways of operating that works best for us. Just remember that others don't all have our same strengths and can really solve a lot of confusion when we don't see something the same as others. When we flex to others, we don't lose ourselves. We gain a better communication and connection with the other person. They trust us more with their decisions. No one else around you really needs to know, like I said, but it would be nice. But you can start today by using it and looking at the opposite sides of what your strength is and focusing on seeing it when it presents itself in others, and then use the techniques listed to understand and communicate better with them. If you want to dig further into this information by taking the Myers-Briggs indicator to verify your type, to look for more resources on great books about this, visit the page called Myers-Briggs, where you will find a lot more about this topic. I wish you the best in shifting your communications and seeing the results. Honor your strengths, appreciate others who may think differently, look and listen for the differences. You're going to see them everywhere.
We hope from today's program you are now focused on your next step. For free handouts and more topics from Jennifer, please visit www.jenniferspeaks.com and call to refer or book Jennifer in your city.
This book is continued on Disc 6.